Breaking news from Minnesota. A shocking move by the FBI has left state investigators in the dark. Today, we dive deep into the controversy surrounding the investigation of Alex Pretti's shooting and what it means for justice in the United States. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, commonly known as the FBI, has made a formal announcement that is sending shockwaves across the state of Minnesota. According to multiple top-tier news sources, including Star Tribune, KSTP, The Guardian, MS Now, and KARE 11, the FBI has informed the state's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, BCA, that they will not be providing access to any evidence collected in relation to the fatal shooting of Alex Pretti by a federal ICE agent. This unprecedented move marks a stark departure from standard procedure. Historically, federal and state investigators have collaborated extensively on high-profile cases, sharing files, evidence, and insights in order to ensure transparency and accountability. However, the latest announcement effectively blocks state officials from accessing key materials that could prove critical to understanding the circumstances surrounding this shooting. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, who has overseen the state's legal response, expressed deep concern about the FBI's decision. In an interview with national media, he described the move as novel and concerning, emphasizing that it raises serious questions about the motivations behind such an exclusion. "It feels like an attempt to shield certain individuals from accountability," Ellison remarked. State officials now face the challenge of pursuing justice in the absence of direct access to federal evidence. Ellison confirmed that the Minnesota Attorney General's Office and Hennepin County Attorney's Office are actively exploring all available legal avenues, including the possibility of court action, to ensure that state investigators can perform their duties. "We are not going to stand for this. The goal is to get to the truth and secure justice flat out," he stated. The controversy has ignited a debate on the balance of power between federal and state authorities. Observers note that the exclusion of state investigators from a case of such public importance is highly unusual. This has amplified public interest, particularly among communities closely following federal immigration enforcement and ICE activities. Further intensifying the story is the potential for missing or tampered evidence. While Ellison reassured the public that sufficient existing evidence could still support charges if deemed necessary, he cautioned that the absence of the complete file leaves open vulnerabilities that defense counsel could exploit. The strategic withholding of information raises questions about whether the standard of probable cause and fair legal procedure can be fully upheld in this case. Top news outlets, including Star Tribune, highlight the political context surrounding these actions. Critics argue that the move reflects broader attempts within federal agencies to protect ICE agents from scrutiny, which some observers see as an effort to allow agents to operate with impunity. This has sparked concerns about civil liberties, accountability, and the broader enforcement of immigration laws within the United States. Attorney General Ellison outlined specific measures he believes are essential to safeguard justice in cases involving federal agents. These include ensuring that the state is involved in joint prosecutions and independent investigations whenever there is a state interest, implementing standard police protocols for identification and use of force training, and eliminating exemptions that permit racial profiling. These proposals reflect long-standing criticisms regarding the oversight of federal immigration enforcement agencies and their interactions with state authorities. Qualified immunity, a legal doctrine that protects government employees from liability under certain circumstances, also emerged as a central topic. Ellison explained that while these protections exist, they are not absolute, and agents who act outside the scope of their duties must still face civil or criminal accountability. News coverage from KSTP and The Guardian emphasizes that the doctrine, especially in the context of federal-state conflicts, can complicate the pursuit of justice, but does not grant blanket immunity for misconduct. The implications of this case extend far beyond Minnesota. With federal agencies like ICE operating nationwide, from California to Washington, D.C., state attorneys generals routinely coordinate to monitor abuses, share best practices, and hold federal actors accountable. Ellison noted that collaboration among state AGs is frequent and structured, involving weekly calls and quarterly face-to-face meetings, covering topics from consumer protection to civil rights and federal accountability. In conclusion, the initial phase of this controversy highlights a clash between transparency and federal authority. The decisions made in the coming weeks by the FBI, Minnesota state officials, and the courts
will have lasting implications for how federal and state agencies collaborate in high-profile investigations, particularly those involving federal immigration enforcement. As the public closely monitors developments, major outlets like Star Tribune, MS Now, KSTP, The Guardian, and KARE 11 continue to report extensively, providing detailed coverage of legal, political, and social dimensions of the case.
With the FBI withholding evidence in the Alex Pretti case, Minnesota officials are confronting a complex legal landscape. According to coverage by Star Tribune, KSTP, The Guardian, MS Now, and KARE 11, the controversy has sparked national attention, highlighting potential weaknesses in oversight when federal agents operate with limited state supervision. Attorney General Keith Ellison has stressed that while the absence of some federal evidence is concerning, the case is far from hopeless. The state has sufficient existing evidence to proceed if necessary, but our focus is on ensuring a comprehensive investigation that leaves no gaps for defense counsel to exploit, Ellison explained. This reflects a deliberate strategy to prioritize convictions based on full, verifiable evidence, rather than rushing charges without complete files. At the heart of the debate is the doctrine of qualified immunity, which provides certain protections to federal employees against civil or criminal liability. Ellison clarified that there are two forms of immunity at play. First, in civil cases, federal employees may avoid liability if no precedent explicitly prohibits their actions. This has historically shielded some misconduct from legal consequences. Second, under the Supremacy Clause, federal agents can be immune from state criminal prosecution when acting within the scope of their duties. However, Ellison emphasized that neither form of immunity is absolute. If a federal agent acts outside the boundaries of their duties, whether through unnecessary use of force, targeting individuals based on race, or other illegal conduct, they remain accountable. Reports from KSTP and The Guardian underscore that qualified immunity complicates prosecutions but does not prevent them entirely. Courts have repeatedly ruled that when agents exceed their authority, legal remedies are available. The Minnesota Attorney General's office is actively coordinating with other state AGs to ensure that abuses by ICE and federal agents nationwide are monitored. Weekly calls, frequent Zoom meetings, and quarterly in-person gatherings enable state officials to share intelligence, best practices, and strategies for accountability. Coverage by MS Now points out that this coordination extends to antitrust issues, labor rights, consumer protection, and civil rights, demonstrating a broad systemic approach to state oversight of federal agencies. Public engagement is also a critical component. Ellison highlighted that the office regularly interacts with community organizations, including the NAACP, Urban League, ACLU, and Democracy Defenders Fund, to gather input and maintain transparency. This ensures that investigations reflect both legal standards and public expectations. KARE 11 reports that such collaboration is vital in cases involving federal agents, where public trust can be severely impacted by perceptions of secrecy or lack of accountability. Another dimension is the training and procedural standards of ICE and other federal agents. Ellison criticized the current state of enforcement, noting inadequate training in de-escalation, racial profiling, and firearm handling. He called for mandatory use of identification, body cameras, and proper reporting protocols to prevent unnecessary deaths. Top news coverage emphasizes that these reforms are crucial not only for Minnesota, but for federal operations nationwide. Political context further amplifies public interest. Critics argue that certain federal policies have historically favored impunity for ICE agents, creating a perception that these officials can operate without accountability. Ellison's statements, supported by reports in Star Tribune and The Guardian, underscore the need for systemic reform, ensuring that state interests are protected and that federal enforcement does not override civil rights. Looking ahead, Minnesota officials are preparing for potential legal challenges. Options include filing court motions to compel evidence sharing, pursuing civil remedies for misconduct, and coordinating with prosecutors to ensure that any charges brought are supported by complete, untainted evidence. The state strategy prioritizes thoroughness over speed, reflecting the seriousness of the case and the desire for convictions that withstand judicial scrutiny. This approach is consistent with professional journalistic coverage from the top 5 news outlets. Reports highlight that while the FBI's decision is unusual, it has not halted the state's investigation. Analysts note that such federal-state conflicts, while rare, are instructive for understanding broader issues of accountability, transparency, and intergovernmental cooperation in the United States. In summary, Segment 2 outlines the legal, procedural, and accountability challenges Minnesota faces following the FBI's decision.
With qualified immunity, federal state jurisdiction, public oversight, and the integrity of evidence all in play, the case serves as a benchmark for future interactions between state authorities and federal agencies. Ultimately, the story of Alex Pretti's shooting and the federal withholding of evidence highlights the tension between state oversight and federal authority, the limits of qualified immunity, and the need for robust procedural standards when acting within the United States. This case will likely influence policies and investigative practices across the nation, providing lessons on accountability, public trust, and the responsibilities of law enforcement agencies operating within the United States.